Recovery Daily podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Miller. I'm a stroke survivor and grateful recovering alcoholic. Today, I wanted to talk about living each day like it's your first versus living each day like it's your last. And this episode is absolutely inspired by a TEDx talk that I listened to today by a woman named Leana Delle. Yeah, Leana Delle. And but I want to talk about my experience with this idea of living each day like it's your last. And she introduced me to this idea about living as if it's your first day. So, I have always heard people talking about what is my life's purpose. And I kind of correlate that to when I am in a sobriety meeting and they're talking about thy will be done, not mine. Like, well, it's God's will. I don't know what that means, honestly. I don't care if I sound ignorant. I don't know what it means. I know what it means for me to push my will on things. So I have just kind of guessed that if I remove my will, then that means it's God's will. That's the best I can try to figure that out. What it means for me, is that I just don't try to control people, places, and things the best that I can. I try not to think that I can control people, places, and things because I can't already. It's a matter of me accepting that or not. So what does that have to do with life's purpose? Well, there's this like gray area for me where I have control over my direction in life to a point. And then life happens, life guides us in different directions. And I certainly thought that my life's purpose was one thing. Um, and that thing was probably like once I got sober, I felt like my life's purpose was to help as many alcoholics as possible to find their way to Alcoholics Anonymous, or share my experience, strength, and hope, so that they may find help themselves. And then I had my stroke, and I thought, oh, well, my purpose has broadened, that my experience, strength, and hope now includes stroke recovery. Well, this was last year, I guess, before I felt like I had this big regression in my symptoms and had to separate myself from my employment and figure out this new version 3.0 of Rachel. Because now, I I started thinking again. I think I have been over the past 4 months. What is my life's purpose? And I don't think I'm ever going to have an answer to that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been doing mentally to try to navigate those thoughts. And also, there was this feeling when I first got sober about feeling regretful of being an active alcoholic when my kids were growing up. I don't know that it necessarily impacted them up until probably high school age. That's when I really took a turn for the worst. And I think it was more apparent and more so affecting them. Although there very well could be instances that experiences they had with me when I was drunk that maybe they haven't shared with me yet. It seems like over time more is revealed to me about how I impacted their lives when I was drinking. But with this feeling of regret that I had in the beginning of sobriety, it made me want to make up for lost time in my life and make up for lost time with my kids and make up for lost time in in my career and where I could have gone. I could have, I would think I wanted to be an astronaut when I was younger. I had big dreams. I wanted to be an actress. But I didn't do anything to pursue that because I chose alcohol over my dreams. As sad as that sounds, that's pretty much what I did. Um, so, so I wanted to talk about where that all went, all those ideas, how those shifted over time, being sober, and how this stroke has affected those thoughts, and talk a little bit about how when when we get sick or a loved one gets sick, it's, there's so many tests, and the waiting is the absolute worst. The uncertainty of what is going to happen, what the future holds in our lives, especially when we're sick, it can make you crazy. And I remember going through those thoughts when my mom was sick with breast cancer. And it was terrifying, to sit and wait. And it almost feels like the doctors don't even give a shit that you're sitting and waiting. They've got thousands, hundreds of other people that they're trying to get tests done and all this stuff. So for each individual patient, sometimes it feels like that. I don't believe that that's true. I think that doctors and nurses and everybody in the medical field, they wouldn't be in that field unless they um, cared about people, but it does feel like that sometimes. And so talking about how the unknown can be uncomfortable, and how over time, almost unknowingly, my questions and my uncertainty shifted over into more of curiosity and wonderment and creative exploration. So I'm going to see if I can talk a little bit about how my mindset has been changing over time, over the past 2 years, that since I had my stroke, and beyond, and how my sobriety ties into all of that. So really just sharing what's going on in Rachel's brain, because I know that if it's going on in Rachel's recovery brain, then it's got to be going on in somebody else's brain. Because what? Because I'm not unique. So about this evaluating life's purpose. When I started this second coming of recovery for my stroke, I I regressed to a point where I just literally one day had to call my boss and tell HR and everyone and say, I can't do it anymore. I'm in too much pain. I can't do it anymore. I literally just threw up my hands and said, I can't do it anymore. And what happened on that day and what has happened over the past 4 months since then, I think that on that day, it might have been the day after or 2 days after, that I called my brother and I said, "Will you please create a podcast account for me?" Because, and I've shared about this, I had to get out what was in my head and my heart because it felt dangerous. It felt like it could lead me to relapse. So I needed to talk about it. I didn't know who to talk to. So I decided I'm going to talk to whoever's going to listen. And by that, I'll do a podcast. So when I started doing this podcast, I've gone back and listened to episode 1 and episode 2 just to hear. It's amazing to hear the distress in my voice, the uncertainty, is coming through in my voice. And I remember thinking in my head that I'm saving myself. That's what I was thinking in my head. I'm saving myself. And then that evolved over the following month, I would say, into maybe this is my life's purpose. Maybe this is, life is happening no matter what. Life just keeps happening. And this is part of my life. Like, this is part of my story now, is a stroke. And it's part of my story that I had to leave my career. So I thought, this is this. I'm trying to articulate this is the story of my life. This is the purpose of my life. I was looking at it on a really grand scale as to, okay, the winds are changing and Rachel is going in a new direction. Her whole life is going in this new direction. Now, as I've entered into, let's see, June, July, August, September, October, the 4th month of recovery, um, I'm more thinking of things on a smaller scale, I think. I'm more thinking of, what's my purpose today? What can I do today? Not only for myself, but for anybody around me. Just for today. And reflecting on the day is so much easier than reflecting on an entire life ahead of me. Um, and I have found, as I've explored some of these thoughts today, that when I get to the point that I'm thinking about my life's purpose, my life's direction, um, that's when things get overwhelmingly scary for me. That's where the discomfort is for me. Um, it it really makes, I guess, drives home for me that my sobriety program tells me to take it one day at a time, um, because, I can hear these things on a daily basis, but depending on the day, I may hear it differently and think about it differently. And that just continues to reinforce that my recovery in general for my stroke and for alcoholism is something that needs to be bookended by uh, my morning meeting and my podcast. And then what happens in between of those two things, that's a pretty manageable chunk of uncertainty. And I'm more than willing to see what happens in a day. Um, but when I try to think beyond that, I really get overwhelmed. And so I'm listening to this book called Bird by Bird. And it's a book about writing because I've been thinking about writing a book. It's not because I think that I'm this amazing person and I don't want it to come across as self-indulgent or anything. It's because I have a lot to talk about, a lot of struggles, emotionally, physically, and I want to find every way possible to explore how to communicate what I'm feeling and what I've experienced to other people so that they can not have to learn the hard way like I did. So I'm listening to this book called Bird by Bird. And today, one of the things that she said was live each day like it's your last. And I've never I never liked that saying. What she said was something to the effect of living each day like it's your last, and we all have the same demise ahead of us, and so on and so forth. Now, I've really, really enjoyed this book. This lady who wrote it is absolutely hilarious. And I'll see if I can find what the author's name is. If you give me a second, talk amongst yourselves. Okay. The the author's name is Anne Lamott, and the book is called Bird by Bird. So I've really, really enjoyed the book. I thought that a book about writing would be boring, but it's really quite funny. Um, so when she said that, I just thought, ugh. And I started having like negative thoughts. I started getting scared. I started thinking about my demise. I don't even like to talk about it. I don't like when people say it. It's just not somewhere that I like my brain to go because my brain will go to a deep, dark place if I think about that stuff. And another thing is that when people say live each day like it's your last, it makes me feel like I'm supposed to go skydiving. That's what it makes me think. It makes me think that I've got a bunch of stuff that I've got to put on a bucket list and I've got to start checking them off. And I don't want to do that. I don't have a bucket list. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I don't have a bucket list because if there's something I want to do, I just go do it. I don't, if there's something somewhere I want to go, then I'm going to save money and go there. I don't have a bucket list of things that just sit around waiting for me to do them one day. I don't really get it, honestly. Like, just do it if you want. If you want to do it. Anyway, um, so Steve Jobs is famous for saying also that if today was so he was talking about looking in the mirror, making it a habit of looking in the mirror and asking himself, if today was my last day, would I want to do what I'm doing today? And so this woman who did the TED Talk named Leana Delle, she talks about this. She talks about how she tried to do this, take Steve Jobs' advice, and looked in the mirror and asked that. And she said that it was funny. She said, like, well, no, if I look in the mirror and I know that ahead of me is I've got to go sit in rush hour traffic, I've got to go to the dentist. I've got to, no, if today was my last day, no, I wouldn't do that. And so that would lead that would lead people to end up not taking care of themselves, and they would that their last day would be sooner should they follow that kind of train of thought. So I thought that was funny, and I agreed with her. And I could relate only in that if I were to look at the mirror and say, would I want to do what I'm doing today? I can't even think about what I'm doing today. I would just fast forward to, well, if today's going to be my last, then how am I going to die? I can't even, because I'm just so obsessed about that whole idea. And I just think that leads to a unhealthy mindset for me. I feel like I'm actually less present in my life as a whole if I live each day like it's my last, and it stresses me out. So that's what I end up thinking about. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about my fears with regard to when I first got into sobriety. Um, when I first had my stroke, um, I really had an intense feeling of fear. And this fear lasted over a year. It's not gone, if I'm being honest. But especially in the first 6 months or so, I mean, even if I were to go back to like the first month after I had my stroke, I was sure that I was going to die, that I was going to have another stroke and I was going to die in my 40s. So I had my stroke when I was 46. I'm 49 now. Um, and I was just, I was living my day living each day like it was my last. I was uh, full of fear that I was going to die. And I was afraid that I was going to have another stroke. Um, I remember everything that I did and that I experienced in the first month and, the months that followed. I felt like it was the last time it could be the last time I'm going to do it. If I took my dog outside, I thought, as fast as my stroke happened, where I walked out the door to take my dog out for a potty break, and I had a stroke, standing there outside. It just happened in the blink of an eye, and I thought I could be gone in a blink of an eye. Like, it just happened so fast. So, um, I felt like I couldn't even take a deep breath. I was so freaking scared. Almost like I was saying goodbye to everything around me. I was thinking about my kids losing their mom. I was thinking about not being around for them when they get married and when they have kids. And I would think about when I went to sleep that I wasn't going to wake up. Because there are some people that have a stroke while they're sleeping and they go to sleep fine and they wake up, if they wake up, with no function on the left side of their body or something like that. And so I was just living in fear. And it was so intense. I know I shared this fear with people around me, but I don't think that I could express it to the degree that I felt it. I can't even right now express it to the degree that I felt it. Because I had my stroke in June of 2021. And then in January of 2022, my friend died. And he died of an alcoholic death. And it just solidified for me that my death was around the corner. That, you know, he went first. You know, I don't know. It was scary. And it still is scary to me, but having gone 2.5 years now without having had another stroke, the fear is time is starting to lessen the fear. The further I get away from the stroke, the less fearful I am. When I started going downhill again this year and have really plateaued at this point where I can't use my eyes very well, and this chronic headaches, and yes, I'm having a pretty bad day with headaches today, but that's because I was spending a lot of time trying to do my insurance and doctor paperwork and all that stuff. Beside the point. But um I can't remember what I can't remember what I was saying. That's what I get for straying off topic. Um so after right. So in the past 4 months that I've been dealing with this reoccurrence and this really, really bad, these bad symptoms, I was fearful that I had another stroke. That's what I thought happened in April of this year, because it was that drastic of a change that I just started having these severe sharp pains in my head, and the vision impairment was just overwhelming. But I didn't have another stroke. So the fear started diminishing again. And as I move further and further away from the stroke, my thoughts, I think, are shifting from fear to grief. And I've talked a lot about grief over the past 4 months. More so than I've talked about fear, I think. I don't think I've really talked about that at all. So the grief part has been, I've talked ad nauseum, if you will, about the grief I have felt from losing this career version 2.0 career woman, Rachel. The grief of losing that identity. And over the past 4 months, I have felt hopelessness. And I guess that's a part of the grief. I have felt, if I let myself unspin and sit in some of these feelings, which I don't let myself do much, which probably isn't healthy. So maybe I need to start talking a little more about my feelings on here. Um, when I let the hopelessness feelings sink in, um, it feels imminent that I'll no longer be driving, or any of the things I used to do. And that makes me feel lost. And my personality is always looking for answers and lifting myself up. Okay, if you're lost, then we're going to find you. That's my reaction. I don't let myself for a second sit and feel lost. If I start feeling lost, I get up and start listening to Bird by Bird and figure out how am I going to write a book. When I start feeling hopeless, I get out my Remarkable tablet and start writing out my script for today's podcast. I started thinking 4 months ago about my big life's purpose thing again, Um, and I was reminded today that I need to continue to look at today's purpose. And that doesn't mean I can't plan for the future, but I need to make sure that I stay grounded in today, as well. Today today is an interesting example because I spent like at least 3 hours printing out forms and filling out paperwork for my insurance company so that I can port all of my insurance over to an individual plan for my kids and I. And I scheduled an appointment with a neuro-ophthalmologist that will be in December. And all of this activity hurts my head. We tried to hire somebody to do this for me, but they didn't think that they felt like they were taking money from me to do something so easy. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. It hurts. But so I do it myself. And as I'm doing all of this stuff, my boyfriend comes upstairs. He's like, I'm making a pizza. Do you want some pizza? Heck yeah, I'll take some pizza. And he walks downstairs, and I'm thinking to myself, I spent all day working on my recovery from a logistics standpoint, from a make sure that I have health insurance and make sure I get paid from disability and all that stuff. It just seems purposeless, if that makes sense. I know it makes sense. It seems like I'm standing still. And you all know how I feel about standing still because I spent the first half of my life standing still when I was drinking. I felt like I wasn't going anywhere. So, but there's nothing I can do about that. I spent the first half of the day working on all this paperwork and stuff. And then, so I had to spend the second half of the day sleeping because my head had to recover from all of that. And my head is still up in the clouds and foggy and aching. I'm sitting here with my eyes closed doing the podcast because of the effects of just doing all of this paperwork. So I have days like this. I woke up this morning again, just like I did yesterday, feeling really hopeful and in a good mood about I get to spend the day alone. I've talked to you about that. I'm kind of enjoying that whole idea of spending the day alone. Um, but then when I get halfway through the day and I'm just working on insurance stuff, then I start feeling like I'm not accomplishing anything in my life, like my life's purpose, right? I'm not I'm not accomplishing anything. Um, but there are days like that. What was I accomplishing for my life's purpose when I was working every day? I'm sure that people who are, working 8, 10, 12 hours a day are probably identifying with me as far as, I feel like I'm standing still. So I'm kind of glad that I just expressed that out loud because it kind of made me laugh that maybe it's no different than how I was feeling before. So I'm going to settle down about that. Yay! I feel better about that. Okay, moving on. Um, so now over to living each day like it was my last, with regards to my sobriety. That one's pretty easy for me. When I was drinking, when I was an active alcoholic, I was drinking, I was living each day like it was my last, period. I mean, in every respect, I was killing myself. I looked in the mirror. I've shared this in the podcast before. I looked in the mirror and said, whispered to myself after I was looking at the emptiness in my eyes, I said, "You're already dead." So I was already living each day as if it was my last. So this brings me to this TEDx talk that I heard. Again, this was by Leana Delle. And what she said is live each day as if it's your first. And I absolutely love this. It's such a great way for me to look at each day. And on a good day now in recovery, I've just talked a lot about the pain that I feel in my head and in my heart in recovery. And I don't talk about that a lot because it's uncomfortable, I have to feel the pain to talk about it. But on a good day in recovery, I'm feeling very much like hopeful and looking at each day as brand new. There's so much to explore, and it reminds me of in sobriety, we call it, when your anniversary comes around, we call it your sober birthday because it's like being reborn. And I think as I've gotten sober, I've I've become this sober Rachel version 2.0, who I never thought. I mean, if Rachel 1.0 could meet Rachel 2.0, Rachel 1.0 would think Rachel 2.0 is a complete nerd. Because I just have so much excitement for everything I never had interest in when I was drinking. Everything. Um, and then now in stroke recovery, now that I'm again getting further and further away from my stroke and getting closer and closer to a stroke survivor community, I'm starting to feel that I was just given another chance to be stroke survivor Rachel version 3.0. And there's a lot of promise with that. There's a lot of opportunity with that. There's a lot of purpose that I can find on a daily basis. So I'm going to keep trying to do that. And thanks for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow.